Good afternoon and welcome everybody. I'm Alistair Pym, VP of Innovation and Partnerships at NECC, and I'm very happy to welcome you to the fourth of our 2018 series of 5 webinars on investor and corporate partner readiness, which is organized by Navigate, an NECC innovation program. So can everybody hear me? Mark, is that okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. I'll keep going. This webinar series is part of NECC's and Navigate's mission to support clean tech entrepreneurs and ecosystem stakeholders such as incubators, accelerators, and other innovation organizations located across the Northeast, meaning the 6 New England states and New York, by providing them not only with learning opportunities and access to experts, but as well connections to investors, corporates, and customers to help them start, grow, and scale their businesses. Throughout the series, we've talked about several aspects related to investment and to strategic partnerships, and recordings of all those webinars can be seen on our YouTube channel. Today, we have a great story about how early stage startups can partner with a corporate strategic, which is in this case is a global energy company, global utility. And we have a great speaker lineup. But first, just let me run through the flow of the session and mention some housekeeping issues. I hope you can see all the slides, and we're now going to move to slide 2. And that you can hear all the speakers. So if you have any issues, please put a message up in chat. We're recording the webinar, as I said, so we'll share the link of that recording later on after the event's over. But the way you can ask questions is using the Zoom chat feature, so please familiarize yourself with that. And then afterwards, we very much like you to complete a survey, and you can see the link on the screen here, but we'll send out the slides to you all afterwards with that link. Moving on to the next slide, I'd just like to mention that you can see all of our speakers, who you'll be introducing in a second. I will introduce Mark, our moderator, to do that. Moving on to the next slide. We have one with our sponsors. This webinar series, and in fact our programs at NECC, have the invaluable support of 3 main sponsors: the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center, MassEC, NYSERDA, the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, and Rhode Island Commerce Corporation. They all help us by working closely to design and provide programs which are all vetted and vet opportunities to the clean tech community. So we appreciate their support. Our ultimate goal is to drive innovation and accelerate the clean energy sector in the Northeast. And it's a real honor to have all 3 of these as partners. Thank you very much. For NECC, the Northeast includes New York and all 6 states of New England. And we have an extensive network of investors, corporate partners and customers, and professional services firms. In fact, everything we believe a clean tech startup needs to help them start and grow and scale their business in the Northeast. I'm shortly going to introduce the moderator, Mark Barnett, and then he will introduce the panel and the speakers. We'll then have a panel discussion and leave some time for Q&A at the end from you, the audience. But every one of you is muted apart from the speakers and will not unmute. So please use the Zoom chat feature to send in your questions. Then the moderator, Mark, will pick the best questions to put to the speakers. Okay, so I think without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce our moderator today, Mark Barnett, who's the co-chair of Foley Hoag's Energy and Clean Tech Group and head of the firm's Renewable Energy Project Finance and Development Practice. Mark, the floor is yours.
Alistair, thank you so much. It's an honor and a pleasure to be part of this webinar today. NECC is playing a vital role in the clean tech ecosystem here in the Northeast, and continues to do lots of fantastic educational programming like this one. And indeed, we do have an incredibly strong panel here today. I'll say quickly before I introduce the panel that I've had the chance to do a number of deals with corporate investors over time, including Engie, and been very impressed by them. And myself was at a clean tech startup myself where we took in corporate venture capital. So I'll be adding some comments here along the way, but for the most part, we'll be letting our panelists really share some of their wealth of experience in this sector. On the panel today, we have Scott Pinizzotto and Shiraz Haji from Engie New Ventures. And we'll let them introduce themselves, but needless to say, Engie is really a global leader in the clean energy space, and they've gone through an amazing transformation over the last few years, and are really making some interesting investments in the space. We also have Joel Ullman from Redaptive and Matthew Lumsden from Connected Energy, both companies that have received investments from Engie, and so they can speak hopefully a little bit candidly about their experiences, but obviously they've imagined they've had some very positive experiences, but we'll also be talking about some of the challenges today as we get into the discussion. So without too much further ado, let me pass it over to Scott Pinizzotto from Engie New Ventures, who's going to provide some real overview of Engie and their experiences. Shiraz will also add to this discussion, then we'll hear from Joel and Matthew talking about their companies and their experience with Engie, and then we'll get into more of a back and forth discussion. So Scott, please, it's yours.
Okay, thanks Mark. Thanks NEC for inviting us to join the webinar, and to NEC for your valuable kind of fostering of the clean tech ecosystem in the Northeast. So I'm Scott Pinizzotto with Engie New Ventures. New Ventures is the corporate venture arm of Engie. And Engie is a global energy player, and we're focused mostly on electricity, natural gas, and energy services. And we're the #1 independent power producer in the world. And as many incumbents, for some time now, we've been actively transforming ourselves around the new energy landscape of the 3 Ds. So that's decarbonization, decentralization, and digitization. We're nearly complete with about a $15 billion divestment out of traditional power production. We're focused on low carbon and renewables in terms of sources. And in parallel, we're building kind of new energy models, business models around the 3 Ds, leveraging our expertise and our global scale, but then also more importantly, the innovations of both internal and external, to advance sort of the energy transition. So Mark, you can go to the next slide. Just real quickly, a bit about New Ventures. We're investing in startups and facilitating strategic collaboration with those startups. And that's an important component of this larger 3D strategy for the Engie Group. We established Engie New Ventures in 2014 with the objective to really scout and make direct investments into startups that have innovative products and services and or business models that are complementary to our existing and new businesses. So over the past 4 years, we've made about 20 investments, mostly in North America and Europe. And you can see more about our investment areas, our portfolio, how to engage with us on our website at engienewventures.com. So I don't plan to cover all the details on this slide right now, but happy to address those more if there are questions. Go to the next slide. And so each corporate venture capital fund sort of has their own flavor of investing, and that's true for us as well. We look for innovative solutions that really complement and enhance our existing business offerings. So for us, this is more around services and managing of assets than it is investing in core technologies. So for example, we are more likely to invest in a platform that optimizes distributed resources for multi-site customers than we would be into a battery chemistry or some innovation at the battery cell level. And so when we look for companies, we're really looking past the development phase. We like have some revenue, have some customers, and that are really ready to scale. And while we definitely want to engage startups earlier in the process, our sweet spot for investing is around a Series B, perhaps Series A, perhaps Series C, depending on the circumstances. So, and our average initial investment typically is around 3 to 5 million, and we do go smaller or bigger depending on the circumstances. And so while making a good financial investment is important for us and for any fund, really for us, strategic fit is a required ingredient for us to place an investment. And specifically, we found that having a really strong two-way strategic value is really a good recipe for success, where we're where the startup is adding value to us through its innovation, but also that Engie is adding value back to the startup. And so if, in fact, we spend probably, both before investing and after an investment, a significant amount of time fleshing out strategic collaboration potential with the startup, kind of around that two-way value proposition. And so while we're not perfect at this, it is definitely that combined with the structure of kind of being easy to deal with as a venture fund is something that we really strive to achieve. We can go to the next slide. So I know there's a lot of text on this slide, and I don't plan to go through it all, but I kind of wanted to put it out there, and hopefully if there's interest or questions, we can discuss and dive into this more in the discussion portion. But, as a startup considering strategic investors, there definitely are advantages and disadvantages and or challenges. And so the right corporate investor can really add a lot of value and complement your other investors that maybe are sitting around your board. And that can be through expertise, it can be through our longer time horizon, through the credibility that a corporate brings, but also big corporates, and sometimes it can be challenging to deal with and to navigate. They often have shifting priorities. And so those are also considerations as well. And as I said before, each strategic has its own flavor and approach to investing. So, I would highly recommend that you spend some time with internally first, defining what's important to you as a startup in terms of your key strategic aspects related to your company, and then take a really proactive approach in terms of, assessing strategics out there that could be a good match for you. So again, happy to dive into both of these topics more in the discussion section, but that's kind of all I have for now, Mark.
Great, thanks, Scott. That was fantastic. So I think at this point we'll ask Matthew and Joel to each give a presentation about their companies and their experience with corporate venture capital, and I think Shiraz will contribute to this part of the discussion a little bit as well.
Great, thanks, Mark. Can you hear me? Just given the issues, I want to make sure I'm talking to an audience.
Yeah, no, I think you're coming through loud and clear.
Good. Okay, so we can go ahead and go to the next slide. And just to quickly overview who Redaptive is, what we're doing at a high level, really the way we think about this is that we're aiming to transform the way buildings, so the built environment, consume resources, be it energy, water, steam, whatever, in order to make those buildings better for people, the planet, and our customers' bottom line. And the way we're doing that is by addressing three key barriers that we've identified in the marketplace to rapid, large-scale adoption by commercial and industrial customers of energy efficiency upgrades. We view energy efficiency really as trapped cash flow. These are savings dollars that are available to be harvested and are just not being taken out of our customers' building portfolios because of three key areas. One is the availability or ready access to capital. And so a lot of our customers have cash, but it's not being allocated quickly to address these energy efficiency opportunities. The next is having the resources to really go after these energy efficiency opportunities in a rapid kind of large scale fashion. And the third is having the persistent measurement and data transparency and analytics to really validate the savings that we expect we're going to get when we do these efficiency projects. And so Redaptive has brought together unique solutions in each of these areas. We have an efficiency as a service funding solution that allows our customers to access capital very quickly, sidestepping the traditional capital budgeting process, which can be arduous and uncertain. We have a large network, an ecosystem of established installers, OEMs, vendors through whom we can very rapidly scale these energy efficiency projects, be it a 300 building LED lighting upgrade or a 100 building rooftop unit, end of life asset replacement strategy. We can bring the resources to bear, and we have the program management expertise to make that happen. And then finally, every retrofit we do, we install and maintain circuit level metering on every asset that we touch to persistently measure and demonstrate the value of the savings that we're achieving. So in this way, we're kind of removing these barriers and really giving our putting ourselves on the same side of the table as our customers, and giving them kind of a no-lose value proposition, which is bundled around a large amount of risk transfer from the customer onto Redaptive, where we take on project execution risk, rebate administration risk, technology performance risk. And so it's really a way for our customers to say, yes, let's go do these upgrades that we've been talking about, but haven't been able to get off the ground to deliver immediate savings to our customers. So that's kind of Redaptive. We touch a lot of different areas, and that feeds into the next slide, if we can go there. Around this question, when we did our last round, it was really, okay, the first thing you got to ask yourself is, am I going for a financial investor or a strategic investor? And for us, it was a fairly short conversation, because if you think about all the different aspects of our business, there was really great opportunity for us to benefit, especially if we could find an investor that touched some or all of the things we work on in a complementary way. We were also in a rapid growth phase, so expanding our sales channels was critical. And also, of course, during this growth period, it's important to have some really good strategic advisors to help us navigate that process. And then finally, getting back to those three pillars, really being able to work with someone on the technology and data side who had expertise there around rolling out these large-scale projects, and expanding our partnerships on that front. And although we are focused on the U.S., we're very rapidly being pulled into international markets by our customers. So having a globally oriented partner was very important as well. Next slide. So really, with that context behind it, Engie was really the perfect partner for us in this investment. And it's really yielded some great results for us, but it requires work, and there's pitfalls. And one of the most important things for us has been having Shiraz as our executive sponsor, being extremely engaged and very active in helping us kind of navigate the very large corporate structure that Engie is, because there are so many complementary overlaps. But as with any large organization, it's sometimes difficult to understand who the influencers are, where the decision makers are. We have a project in Spain, and we need to figure out how to stand up a countrywide lighting retrofit or whatever. And so having someone like Shiraz there to help us navigate that structure is extremely important. The other aspect I would say that we've sort of worked through is kind of how do we align incentives. So there's a lot of complementary overlap between partnering on the data and technology side, but also on the sales channel side. And so how do we understand the right ways for us to work together in a complementary fashion, where we can bring to the table things like our unique approach to financing and project rollout, and leverage that against the customer relationships that Engie has, some of the data that Engie has that's available in a complementary way, and so forth. So making those puzzle pieces fit just right is a nuanced thing and requires a fair bit of collaboration and work to get there. But we've had some really good wins in this partnership already. We're doing a number of projects with the Engie Services business unit, who's both doing execution for us, but also serving as a sales channel. And on the insight side, we're having some good success partnering. We're we each have complementary data sets and approaching customers together. It's been very successful there as well. So I'll pass it on to the next section.
And I'm happy to jump in if audio works and it's appropriate for me to chime in for 30 seconds here.
Yeah, please do, Shref.
Wonderful. So it's, first of all, Joel, thank you so much for the kind words. It's, I probably should not chime in and just leave it there when somebody says something nice, but I thought I'd jump in, maybe a little bit repetitive, but I think audience might appreciate why Engie thought and believes in Redaptive and believe what Redaptive is doing is truly transformative to energy efficiency. It really does come down to those three pillars. You know, we analyzed the space and thought that most customers looking at energy efficiency projects and big ESCO projects just really don't want to use their own precious capital to pay for these. They don't believe in the data of the savings, and they just aren't comfortable with the typical execution and the disruption. And, you know, as Joel said, the Redaptive model has really turned those things upside down and created a model where a customer can just not have to use its precious capital, can have perfect transparency with meter level, you know, sub-meters that provide perfect, you know, transparency of what the savings are from the lighting retrofit or what have you. And Redaptive brings a team, often jointly with Engie. So yeah, I'll come back in if there are questions, but I just want to say I've been just incredibly impressed with Joel and his colleagues, and what they're building is something quite special. And I'll leave it here for now.
Thanks, Shiraz, and apologies for not passing it to you earlier. I should have brought you in there, but thanks for the kind words.
All good.
Yeah, no, that's great. So we can go on to the next slide here and pass it over to Matthew to talk about connected energy.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. It's a little faint, I would say.
Okay, I'll transfer. Is that better?
It's very, very faint, Matthew.
Any better?
No, I couldn't hardly hear you then.
Sorry, is that any better?
Yeah, that's better. Keep doing that.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's good. Let's go.
Yeah, great. Okay. Okay. So thanks, Shiraz, and good afternoon, everybody. Or good afternoon. I'm based in the northeast of England, so not the northeast as the US, so slightly different time zone. So I'm the CEO of Connected Energy. Got involved with Engie about 18 months ago. So we develop energy storage systems that utilize second life electric vehicle batteries. So our key piece of IP is around how you communicate with multiple electric vehicle batteries that are all of different levels of degradation, and then operate those as a single energy storage system, largely deployed on industrial and commercial type sites. So I guess a key part of our business is that in order to be successful, we recognized that we had to scale up dramatically so that we were a significant partner for vehicle manufacturers who wanted to be able to find a route to market for these second life batteries. And then also that we needed to find a commercial end user that was interested in deploying sort of large volumes of low cost energy storage systems. So as a business, we see ourselves as bridging the gap between the automotive sector and the end user, the energy sector. We built the business up largely working initially with Renault. So they collaborated with us in terms of sharing their CAN protocols, their batteries. Their technical team worked with us so that we could integrate their batteries, and we've created a flexible platform that enables us to very quickly program the system so that it can operate other people's batteries. So we're currently working with Jaguar Land Rover and Nissan, and also a few other manufacturers from around the world. So we went through a process of raising quite a lot of UK government funding to build the business, prove the concept, deploy our first couple of systems, and then went out for a Series A round the middle of last year and brought on board Engie and Macquarie. So in terms of the progress of the business at that point, we've got a few systems deployed in the UK, 2 or 3 systems across in Belgium, Germany, and the Netherlands. And we're really at a point where we had to get a sort of injection of capital to scale the business up a little bit, but also put some credibility behind the business so that we could sort of start talking to some major clients, which we've achieved fairly successfully over the course of the last 12 months since Engie and Macquarie got involved. So we're now in the next phase of the process, which is raising a Series B round, so that we can scale up again, following on from a lot of the value that Macquarie and Engie have already added. I suppose in visual terms, the bottom picture is their first order, which was a system which they used to prove our kit, to put it on the Dutch grid. And behind that sort of screen, there's a demonstration room so that people can actually go in and see the system in operation and see the configuration and sort of get a bit of a feel for it. And the top photo montage is basically the system that we're busy pricing for them at the moment. So a key area of value that Engie have added is placing orders with us so that we can really scale up the system. So the first system is 150 kilowatts. We're building a system for them at the moment, which is 1.2 meg, and that top system is I think that's a 6 megawatt system, which we're hoping will put to bed turn of the year. Could you go on to the next slide? Oh, thank you. So I guess if you look at our rationale behind this approach, so as I say, we were really keen to find a funding process that would enable us to scale up the business, which is, to the best of our knowledge, we're the only people who have got a commercial system that uses second life battery packs. And we developed a business and found that we had to also work quite hard to develop an industry as well. So it had to be a partner that had some vision and could see where we were trying to get to. So we found that Engie were great in that we've been talking to them a while. They took the time to understand the detail of our business and our plans, rather than just doing a sort of pure financial or legal due diligence on it. In terms of the route to market, then that was the big issue for us, in that we had to find a significant pipeline of projects to make sure that we kept people like Renault and Nissan on board in terms of supplying us with batteries. And obviously they've got some key external relationships that can help us, both with people like Renault, but also with large scale customers. In terms of the I guess Engie's strategy in terms of investing in other businesses, there was an excellent fit between what we were doing and a number of their business units around the world. So we're working with numerous business units on sort of market entry strategies for China, North America, etc. And we found that there was a very attractive fit there for us as a business, which was exactly what we were looking for. We recognized that cash wouldn't be enough. We had to we needed more, and then really the global coverage was good. So when we looked at the distribution of Engie's business units, the key thing for us was not only locations where energy storage was on the agenda, but also locations where electric vehicle batteries were available, so where EVs were being deployed. So there was a really good fit there. So that was what we were looking for, and the experience has been incredibly satisfactory. So talking to sort of strategic business units within people like Nissan and Renault and Jaguar Land Rover, you've got to, we're providing a strategic solution to them, and going there as an SME is helped significantly when you can sit your investment director from Engie and Macquarie alongside and, have a slightly different kind of a conversation. I've already talked about the sort of process of scaling up the technology, and again, that's given us the opportunity to demonstrate systems to a range of customers and start to increase our credibility with the supply chain and drive our costs down as well. I suppose probably the biggest thing for me has been the access to the business of resource, expertise, support, and orders. We're on a steep learning process, and the sharing of expertise across their various different business units, their investee companies, and generally, I think from the experience I've had of various other strategic investors, Engie seems to have quite an innovative approach on how to sort of marry up the various different investees and get them working together. And that strategic vision's been useful from our point of view in terms of helping us drive our strategy as well. And I suppose the final piece of the jigsaw is obviously, once you have brought a corporate investor in and you're going for your next investment round, then you've already got a party there that knows your business, and it makes the next step much easier. I think the biggest observation we would make is that, we've been invested in by the biggest independent energy company in the world, and that's not an opportunity to squander. So I think a really, really important thing for us was figuring out how we shape our business to capture that opportunity. So that's a key part of what we're doing in terms of our restructuring process at the moment. Figure out how to expand globally in line with some of the resources Engie can offer us. So that's it from me. Thanks, Shiraz.
Well, thank you, Matthew. That was excellent. I think both your presentation and Joel's gave us some sense of some of the value that an international corporate investor like Engie can bring to the table. I think to start off the discussion, I think it'd be good to kick it back to Scott and Shiraz, to the extent you want to contribute, to talk about your overall investment selection process. We've heard about two companies that I think both benefited from the global nature of Engie's business, for sure. But I think for entrepreneurs out there curious about how to think about a corporate investor and when to contact them, it'd be helpful for you to talk about what you're looking for. I mean, beyond what's on the slides in terms of types of companies and sort of how you know if a company is a fit or not, and you're ready to take it to a next level of diligence and the like.
Yeah. Hey, Mark, this is Scott. Just because of my audio challenges, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. I'll say something, and then Shiraz, feel free to add to this. I think there's the whole spectrum of, when we talk about strategic fit, sometimes there may already be collaboration and commercial relationship with one of our business units in a startup. And in those cases, that's a great sort of step one that's already there. And then we spend a lot of time looking about the broader, bigger picture. Are there other business units that potentially there could be a broader strategic fit? So again, I come back to strategic fit because that's really important for us. In that case, there may be existing collaboration, and that's kind of a great scenario or starting point. But more often than not, there is not necessarily existing collaboration. Maybe we're scouting a particular area because we know that's a need or an interest of a business unit, and we're trying to identify the best companies in the space. And so we're spending time to sort of explore the potential collaboration. And so that definitely is kind of a big part of our process. And then kind of when you overlay that with the competitiveness of, other investors, financial VCs wanting to get into those really good companies that are doing well and really ready to scale, you've got to be fast as well. So from our perspective, it's that strategic fit, and also being able to move and act quickly and be able to get into the really attractive deals that are out there.
Would you say the collaboration often precedes investment, or is it a mix?
It's definitely a mix. I would say more often than not, there's no existing commercial collaboration in place, but it's definitely on the horizon, and we paint that picture of what that could look like in the next 12 months, next 24 months. Okay.
That's great. So Joel and Matthew, you both talked about some of the fit and the reasons why you thought Engie was or corporate generally, but Engie in particular was a good option for you. I mean, can you talk a little bit about some of the concerns you had going in and how they played out, and whether there were challenges? I mean, you hinted at them, but just I think digging into that a little more would be helpful.
Yeah, sure. I can start with that. This is Joel. Yeah, I sort of alluded to it earlier, but I think one of the biggest concerns as you engage with, we're a small company, Engie is a very large company, is, yeah, there looks like there's a lot of opportunity, but will we be able to really, retrieve value out of that opportunity, and will we be able to plug in and decipher the organizational structure and really drive the value that we expect to gain from the relationship. So I think that that was one of the things we discussed. But again, with the strong partnership with Shiraz is vital. I would say if you are looking at a strategic investor, and there's a big difference in size, as there likely will be, making sure that you have that sort of internal champion or point of contact identified is really critical, and maybe having that conversation up front about, hey, we need some real hands-on involvement here to make sure we can really navigate this and not just figure out the structure, but really understand the incentives and how we get folks internally to trust us. Just because the company made an investment, that doesn't mean that everyone's automatically going to throw open their door for you, and it still requires a lot of work and relationship building. And so having that internal champion has proven invaluable for us. And not to say that it wouldn't have happened without it, but it certainly is much more efficient and rapid, and our ability to drive value through the relationship is greatly enhanced through that kind of sponsorship.
Great.
I guess my comment on that would be that I think our biggest concerns sat right at the beginning of our sort of interactions with Engie, in that we chose to invest a lot in that relationship, and in order to develop that relationship, we chose to be very open before really even investment was on the table. And I think that was a very valuable approach, and I think our openness was appreciated. But it was at that point that we had the concerns that obviously what we're doing is something that if you say too much, other people could try and do as well. So the key thing for us was developing the level of trust, and I guess we started talking to Engie about a year before they actually made the investment, got to know them pretty well, and really thought strategically about how best we can take advantage of the relationship. So the big risk was, are we shooting ourselves in the foot by being too open? And the result was, well, actually no, it was a risk worth taking, and it paid off. But I have to say we've taken a similar approach with other parties, and we've withdrawn because we weren't comfortable in progressing that, because you've got to be able to work together, haven't you?
Absolutely. And I think and this is pulling in a question from the Q&A log. It sounds like the sponsor relationship that Shiraz played for Engie New Ventures has been very helpful. It'd be good to know if that's something that that Engie New Ventures has for every investment, and whether that translates over to the business units as well. Whether you have separate sponsors in the business units. If you could talk about that, that'd be great. Because I don't, in my experience, that's not something that all corporate investors do, and that sounds like a really helpful piece of making sure the actual investment works and plays through.
Yeah, I can take a
for
cut
sure.
at it. This is.
Go ahead.
Please,
Yeah.
you go first, Joel. No, go
Well,
first.
all I was going to say is that A, it's a very astute question, but B is that I view, Shiraz, your assistance as identifying those, the specific points of contact and additional champions column within each of these groups, right? You know who to plug us into within the broader Engie organization, given your knowledge there. So go ahead, I'll yield the floor.
No, that's spot on. I think there are absolutely business champions within the business units. I have some relationships, but in many ways, I work with Joel and his team on a journey to kind of work together and let's go explore this vast global company and see where there's really good possibilities for partnerships that work. In some cases, I've got really great relationships and I can leverage those relationships to try to advocate why this might make sense. But in any of these scenarios, I don't work for the businesses and, they make their own independent decisions. I think, Mark, your question is the way we're structured is, Scott and myself work on the North American deals and there are investment directors in Europe and we absolutely do our best. So for the company Scott manages, he does an amazing job of trying to advocate for them internally within the Engie world. But, in the case of Redaptive, to specifically answer the question, there's a champion within Engie Services who has a commercial partnership with Redaptive, and there's a champion within Engie Insight, the new name for Ecova, that does the same. And there are emerging executives in Europe who are really exploring what they could do with Redaptive.
Great, that's helpful. I'd like to circle back to Scott. One of your slides you presented early on about pros and cons of corporate VCs, and focus for a second on the types of terms that entrepreneurs might expect from corporate VCs that might be different, either kind of more founder friendly or less founder friendly, and why. If you could talk about that a little bit, and then maybe Joel or Matthew, feel free, or Shiraz, feel free to jump in and add any color or responses there. That'd be great.
Yeah, that'd be great. And maybe you guys can pull up that slide as I speak to it. But yeah, I think in terms of, and again, this comes back to every corporate venture fund has their own approach to investing and the strategic aspect versus financial aspects, et cetera. And specifically to terms, they're for us, and I can't speak to other corporates, but for us, acquisition is just one of many potential exits for investments that we make. It is not a foregone conclusion that we think that we will acquire every company we invest in, and quite the contrary. We recognize that that's likely not the case. That there's many potential outcomes. So we do not do anything special or try to lock up the company in terms of right of first refusals. We don't require, or link our investment, in every case to a commercial agreement. That may happen in parallel, but we try to keep those two fairly separate. So our approach as a corporate is really to be much more like a financial VC in terms of our requirements, our terms, and keep those relatively standard, to the market that's there from a standard VC perspective. Shiraz, feel free to add to that, and then it'd be great to hear the perspectives of Redaptive and Connected.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add. That sounds good. Over to you guys.
Yeah, I guess from our perspective, I mean, I guess the one the one difference that was probably felt most strongly is a deeper understanding and analysis of the operational aspects of our business. It's very clear when you're sitting across the table from an investor that does some of the things that you do or deeply understands what you do, and ultimately I think that's a good thing. It drives for a better understanding of what you're creating and of the value, and Shiraz sort of alluded to it earlier, around really some of the understanding that he sort of has inherently around how we really are transforming this business. So I think that's that was, I would say, a valuable component of it.
From
Hey,
our
Mark.
side,
Yeah, go ahead.
So I guess what we've encountered through the sort of due diligence process with other investors is that there seems to be quite a different approach to visibility of what's going on in the business. I'm not talking about the operational side, but more in terms of the commercial deals and the customers, etc. So, perhaps this comes back to your earlier question about concerns, but we obviously key customers for us are utilities and other major players in the energy sector. And I guess we always had a concern that, if we worked with somebody like Engie, then would that close other doors for us? And it was clear from the due diligence process we've been through with other parties that the level of knowledge they want around some of the transactions we're doing would be very difficult for some of our other customers. Whereas our sort of experience with Engie is more that, it's great if we've got some other customers, it adds value to the business, but, we haven't had any problems in terms of the wanting to get too much into the detail of that. So, I think on reflection, and this is something that's been a positive thing on reflection, I think it's important to make sure that you don't get involved with a strategic investor that's going to close other doors for you. You've got to make sure that you don't close any drawbridges behind you.
Yeah, and picking up on that, in a specific question from our Q&A is whether you have any advice, whether you or as a recipient of corporate venture capital, of how you separate the customer type relationship or the kind of strategic partner relationship from the investor relationship. If Joel or Matthew have any advice for folks out there on not just picking the right partner, but specific things you can do that would help with that, that'd be, I think, great to hear.
Well, from our perspective, we're working with a few energy suppliers, utilities, and when we first announced that Engie had invested, then a couple of those raised questions, and to be honest, the concerns were quite easily resolved in that we ended up putting some conditions in the sort of how we operate at board level to sort of provide some confidence that we're not going to go into the details, but to be honest, we never do, so it's never been constraining. And I think, there's pros and cons of it in that, there are funds within corporates that, from what I understand, claim to add value to the business, but in fact really are a little more than a financial investor, and therefore you just get your money. But at a practical level, I think the important thing to do is make sure that you get an investor that can add to the business, and then, deal with the conflicts, but make sure that those conflicts are understood from the beginning.
Yeah, I guess the only thing I would have to add there is that alignment of incentives. And it wasn't really a conflict. It was more around sort of, that there are customers we can go after together, and really understanding sort of what the how we need to structure those engagements to make sure that this is interesting to the account directors at Engie, who we're working with, and not just, hey, hand us your customer, So although the complementary nature of our partnership is pretty apparent, there's a lot of nuance to making sure that, at a personal level, people still feel there's value in them spending time on this, because we're all very busy and trying to, hit numbers or whatever else. And so kind of navigating that, I think, was more than anything something we had to work through. There hasn't really been a conflict specifically. It's been very complimentary so far, I'd say.
Maybe just jumping in to pour a little bit of cold water. It's not easy working with Engie or any very large company. I think the biggest challenge that I see in the relationship, not specifically with Redaptive, but just the startup, is just the pace. I think there's Engie is a very big company that is quite used to doing a lot of analysis and financial analysis around any kind of big decision. And so it often is the case that the pace of decision making in the diligence process is not quite aligned. And, I think that'd be an advice I have for you. I think Matthew said you guys chatted for a year before. That's brilliant. And, I think if I were a CEO going into a potential partnership with any very large global company, I would not try to expect to get, from first handshake to deal done in 30 to 60 days. It happens, but it's quite rare that it can go that fast.
That sounds like good, sage, and somewhat sobering advice for everyone to remember out there, especially the extent that corporate venture has to some extent come in to fill a gap in traditional venture. It's just important to remember that, I think, for any entrepreneur looking to approach a corporate venture capital firm, is it's probably not going to happen quickly, and it's you need to take a longer term view to building that relationship. So we have one more question from the audience, and we're getting towards the end here. So let me throw the question out, and it's for Shiraz and to some extent Scott, and then would love everyone to then take that to launch off into kind of any final thoughts. But the question is sort of Shiraz, what's your incentive internally? And maybe this is too sensitive to answer, and if so, have to say, but what's your incentive to help these investments succeed, and sort of how does that work in terms of financial investors obviously have a financial upside. Is it work differently within a corporate VC like Engie? If you could speak to that, and then feel free to share any final thoughts, and then Scott, take it away, and then Matthew and Joel as well.
Yeah, I won't comment on like specific, incentives and comp, but I will say we at the top level have a dual mandate, financial as well as strategic. Scott and I were on a team call this morning. We, got cash wired back to the Engie New Ventures account yesterday. There was a return. We all think like a financial investor does, and what was the cash on cash and the IRR on that return. And so when that's important for, I think, the entrepreneur to note, because it is about alignment when it comes to Redaptive doing an amazing job of working with 3 other big, large corporates and getting business from them. Maybe that steps on somebody's toes at Engie, but we're thrilled because it helps Redaptive grow faster. So be aligned and just wanting them to grow and create more value. And I'll leave it there because I forgot the second part of the question.
All right, Scott, any final thoughts before we pass over to Matthew and Joel?
I would just add that, obviously we've got that dual mandate, financial and strategic. So unlike a traditional VC that's maybe looking for a really, really successful financial return, we're okay with something that is maybe a nice exit, nice return financially, but had a great amount of strategic collaboration associated with it. And I think the question specifically was, what's our incentive to help those investments succeed? As Engie New Ventures, we're a little bit separate from the Engie group. So our incentives are on behalf of the investments that we're making. So we really are looking at that company and how we can help them, both from succeeding, but also then on that strategic collaboration. And, and there are many cases internally where we may say, that a particular collaboration is going to take a lot more time and effort than maybe it's worth. And so if that's the case, we often take the stance of thinking in what's the best interest of the startup. So hopefully that helps.
Great. Thank you, Matthew or Joel. Any final thoughts to leave the panelists with?
I suppose from our point of view, there's the quid pro quo on this, in that I think from our point of view, we're also very conscious that we don't want to be too reliant on Engie, and we don't want to take that opportunity for granted. So I think the really important thing when you've got a partner like that is also to use the knowledge that you gain from working with them to sort of try and develop relationships with other partners as well. Otherwise, the risk is just too great.
Yeah, that's a fair point. And the only other thing I'd say is, I think it was just mentioned, but to start the conversations early, and obviously be very thoughtful about how that the overlap may look complementary on the surface, but really think deeply and sort of scenario plan out how that complementary how you're really going to extract value out of that complementary overlap, and does it really work when it comes down to putting the rubber to the road.
Excellent. Well, thank you, and thank you to all of our panelists for sharing such insightful thoughts here. I think we're out of time, so we're going to wrap up. Alistair, I don't know if you wanted to say any final words. I know that the webinar is being recorded and will be posted, and the link will be sent around to everybody who registered. Alistair, anything?
Yeah, thank you, Mark. I just wanted to thank you for doing a great job as moderator, and thank the speakers, Scott, Shiraz, Joel, and Matthew, for doing a great job of explaining the complexities of partnerships between startups and a big organization. Thanks again to our sponsors, MassCC, NYSERDA, and Rhode Island Commerce Corporation. And thank you to Katerina for organizing this. So we will be sending out the link with the recording, and also please don't forget to do the survey and let us know what you thought. Sorry about the snafus at the beginning, but I hope you all learned a lot. Thanks again.